Hey everybody, how's it going? So this video is one of those patron request videos. For those of you who don't know, if you subscribe to my Patreon, if you become a patron, and a link to that below, you can request that I make a video on any topic or do a stream on a topic, do reaction content, whatever you'd like, so long as it pertains to, the regular subject matter that I do, theology, philosophy, etc. So I'm delighted to do this one, though, because it's on somebody who I've admired very much over the last few years, ever since I discovered his work, and that is Wolfgang Smith. So this patron wants me to kind of do a video, just, I guess, commemorating him, because he had died earlier this year in the summer, I believe in July. So just wanted me to do a video kind of commemorating him, but also talking a little bit about his key insights in the world of, the philosophy of science, ontology, but also to speak about what I think about his view on perennialism, right? Because he did belong to this traditionalist school, which leaned pretty heavily into perennialism, the esoteric, etc. So I want to talk a lot about that, but I do want to just commemorate his life and his contributions. He's a wonderful and beautiful soul, a devout, faithful Catholic, and I think his legacy will go far into the future and will be felt by generations, I think. So let's just talk a little bit about his work, but starting with his contributions to the philosophy of science. So at a most foundational level, how does he contribute? Well, I think it's through one key insight that he understood going into his scientific career. Wolfgang understood, and coming from a place of pretty unique credibility, what the epistemological limitations of experimental science really were going into the field. Having had himself, of course, an extensive background in mathematics and in physics, over the course of his career at a far deeper level, he really came to understand the transformational influence that quantum mechanics had on the scientific paradigm of the 20th century and beyond. But also, given his background in metaphysics and ontology, on top of his scientific background, he also understood that this transformational influence was such that it was really able to, through his interpretation of it, by virtue of his philosophical background, avert the crisis of intelligibility that most physicists had labored under since the discoveries of quantum mechanics. And it's this crisis of intelligibility that he was really trying to attack and to undermine and to ultimately resolve. And I think he did. Now, this crisis of intelligibility with respect to quantum mechanics that I'm referencing, I think is best articulated, and Wolfgang quotes it all the time, by Richard Feynman's axiom that, quote, no one understands quantum theory. That is like Feynman's axiom that has influenced the way that physicists think about the field ever since. Now, this crisis of intelligibility emerges, according to Wolfgang, not so much from the actual data of quantum mechanics, but more so from what he calls the post-Cartesian and materialistic framework within which classical mechanics was understood in the first place. And that's very important. So the fundamental error of the physicist, according to Wolfgang Smith, is therefore to reify or to make corporeal what is in reality a domain of the cosmos that is thoroughly subcorporeal. In other words, since the reign of the Cartesian distinction between, the res cogitans, being of reality of thought, and the res extensa, the mind of the physicist, ever since that distinction, has been unable to interpret physical matter through any other metaphysical lens than that. And in so doing, is unable to distinguish properly between the world of sense perception and the quantum realm as discoverable by way of instruments proper to quantum mechanics. And this is why the whole quantum realm is seen as an unintelligible enigma, and why we speak of this crisis of intelligibility in quantum theory. So it really does stem back to this Cartesian bifurcation, this inability to acknowledge that the qualitative dimensions of reality that are picked up by the mind they do truly map onto the physical universe. And so Wolfgang's answer to this dilemma is, I think, as ingenious as it is remarkably simple. And he remarks very often on its simplicity. Because he has a holistic and a philosophically informed view of the world, given his background in Aristotelian and Thomistic philosophy. Because of that background, he is able to address this quantum enigma precisely on the playing field where it has always belonged, and that is in the realm of metaphysics, ontology, philosophy of nature, and so therefore antecedent to experimental physics. And so for that reason, given his adherence to classical metaphysics, he does leave the reality of the corporeal world in which we live, move, and have our being, so the qualitative world, the existence of whole substances, etc. He leaves all of that as he leaves it very much intact. And so he takes it for granted, therefore, and it is his confidence in taking it for granted, given his metaphysical convictions, and in taking the reality of the corporeal world for granted, this is going to enable him to cut through all of the convoluted layers of what had become, on some level, quantum epicycles, and really to get straight to the heart of the matter, and so circumvent the enigma altogether. So it's in unifying philosophy, ontology, and metaphysics with the data of quantum mechanics that enables him to solve the enigma. So what then is his key metaphysical insight that enables him to therefore circumvent the quantum enigma? Well, as I've said, he presupposes the objective reality of the corporeal world while also recognizing the stellar predictive accuracy that comes with quantum mechanics. And so given the objective reality of the corporeal world of the senses, he is therefore able to introduce in his analysis of quantum mechanics all of the standard Aristotelian implications with regard to the metaphysical constitution of corporeal reality. And so, therefore, that means the distinction between act and potency, the distinction between substantial form and prime matter, etc. Now, in any activity of a corporeal object, per Aristotelian metaphysics, Wolfgang Smith will insist that there is actual being and there's potential being. Potential being, by its very nature, is, of course, ordered towards its realization through some act, and this kind of causality transcends the causality that's discoverable through classical physics, which is what, and it's the causality of classical physics that's always going to presuppose, the spatial temporal dimensions of causality that the scientists are used to observing. And so according to Wolfgang Smith, though, this type of metaphysical causality, which he terms vertical causality, is discoverable in one domain of science, and that is through quantum experimental physics. And through that discipline alone is that kind of metaphysical causality able to be discoverable by way of experimentation and scientific instruments. And so this is the true framework within which we are able to understand the mysterious dimensions of quantum mechanics, like indeterminacy and the like. The quantum measurements allow for the physicist to observe and study what Wolfgang Smith is going to term the physical world, which is midway between act and potency. And this, so he draws this distinction between the physical world and the corporeal world. The corporeal world is the world in which we live and move and have our being. The physical world, though, is properly the subject matter of the physicist. And so, and this physical world is midway between act and potency as discoverable through the corporeal world, right? And that relationship is characterized by Wolfgang's function, which is Sx, where X signifies the corporeal object as perceptible through the senses, and S signifies the object S under the aspect of its physical, or what we would call subcorporeal activity, or potentiae, right? Aristotelian potentiae. And so it's the act of measurement. It's the act of measurement that allows the physicist to actually bridge this gap experimentally between these two domains and to observe what is essentially what's happening is a reduction of potency to act according to its metaphysical or vertical mode of causality. And this is why the quantum realm simply cannot be analyzed according to the same horizontal causal dynamics that one would try to apply to, say, classical physics. Which is why we have quantum physicists making absurd metaphysical statements about how physics has made classical logic obsolete and the like. But it's only when you apply this dynamic of vertical causality borrowed from the pre-modern philosophical tradition, it's only when you do that can this quantum enigma be solved, as hinted at, of course, when Heisenberg, for example, likened quantum phenomena to Aristotelian potentia. And so Wolfgang Smith, this is a man who truly understood how to bring about a real and concrete harmony at the intersection of theology, philosophy, and experimental science. And I think he should be commemorated for it. Now, he's not just known for this, though. He's not just known for his contributions to the philosophy of science. He's also known as like a profound thinker in the area of theology as well. I mean, he's not a theologian, but he has a lot of key insights there. Now, he is often considered to be part of the traditionalist or the perennialist school, which has worried some Orthodox Catholics, seeing as perennialism tends to conflict, of course, with some of the more exclusivist claims of Orthodox Catholicism, which I'm, of course, a part of. So what are we to take of this element of Wolfgang's work? Well, I think it's important to point out that from a Catholic perspective, there has to be some way in which universal patterns of human thought before and after Christ can be interpreted as, preparatory for the reception of the gospel. If this wasn't true, then that would just undermine our whole understanding of how grace relates to nature. So while the divine mysteries, of course, can't be intrinsically demonstrated from reason, we must nevertheless hold that the divine mysteries do correspond to or perfect certain elements of rational thought that belong to the mind, and in belonging to the mind, are therefore able to be precursors to receiving the gospel. So the mind has these natural inclinations, and these natural inclinations that are universal are manifested in these universal patterns of human thought. And so it shouldn't be any surprise to us that throughout the whole world, we can discover patterns of thought that can be harmonized, baptized, integrated, etc., and obviously modified, into the fullness of divine revelation of the person of Christ. So long, of course, as those patterns of thought proceed from the universal and primordial religious impulse in man that can open his heart to receive some encounter with divine presence, however imperfect, of course. And I think this is where the traditionalist school tends to draw a sharp distinction between pre-modern and modern thought, and that there is a truer sense in which pre-modern human thought can reflect a sort of perennial coherence across cultures and civilizations than is the case for modern thought. In modern thought, due to, as we said before, what Wolfgang assesses is as largely the fault of the Cartesian bifurcation between the mental or representational being and extramental being of substance. Due to that bifurcation, there is a radical departure from the pre-modern mystical intuition that our encounter with the corporeal world is itself meant to be a gateway through which our religious sense can be awakened, and in so doing can recognize traces of the divine in and through it. And it's this perennial intuition that affords us a shared language or vocabulary with which to identify the underlying transcendental unity amidst the multiplicity of their corporeal world, and on that basis approach the cosmos and our place in it with an irreducibly realist and therefore theistic set of lenses. Now, it is important to point out that for Wolfgang, this is more or less where perennialism ends, because he's also very consistent and persistent about the fact that on the deepest and most important levels, there is no transcendental unity that can make harmonious or compatible Christianity and the rest of the world religions. So while he recognizes, for example, many key similarities between, say, Vedantic metaphysics and Christian metaphysics, he vehemently resists any attempt at harmonizing the two traditions. To the contrary, he sees Vedanta and Christianity as polar opposites at the most foundational level of comparative analysis. The reason for this is that he recognizes the radical irreconcilability that stands between the Vedantic eschaton, or their view of the end of all things, like the purpose of existence, and the Christian eschaton. Through the Trinity and the Incarnation, the Christian eschaton, according to Wolfgang, and of course the Christian tradition, enables the human nature that we have to become a partaker of the divinity without itself being subsumed into divinity and thereby losing its individuality and identity. It can remain essentially itself, authentically human, while being thoroughly and fully deified, even in the hypostatic union of Christ, the divine and human natures of Christ. The humanity remains fully itself, even as the hypostasis of the human nature of Christ is the divine Logos, the person of the Son of God. And now this is in stark contrast to the Vedantic eschaton, per Wolfgang, which sees the vision of God as only attainable in and through the eradication of any mode of existence that is authentically and properly human. So far from embracing a syncretist variant of Catholicism, Wolfgang's use of the perennial or esoteric wisdom found in the traditionalist school is used entirely at the service of Orthodox Catholicism. And it's for this service that he should be remembered. And so I would strongly encourage everyone who to pick up some of his books so that his legacy can be kept alive, because I do feel that his labors are one day going to be recognized for the transformational potential they have in breaking that logjam of the current scientistic consensus. And once that happens, I think you'll see a lot of opportunities to reshape and restructure and reframe how everyday people think about the world. And I think it can make them much more receptive to embracing a Christian vision of the cosmos. So that's my video on commemorating Wolfgang Smith. Let's pray for his soul. He was a great champion of the faith and of the truth, and I pray that his legacy be felt for generations. So that's that. I hope this was interesting. I hope this was helpful. Thank you to the patron who supports me, and I hope this video was helpful for you. And if you want me to make videos on any content that you'd like, any topic that you'd like, do a stream, reaction, whatever, you can become a patron, patreon.com/classicaltheist. Thank you.